I am Emma, 19 years old, and since I was a child, I have lived in the towering shadow of my older brother, Ethan. In my parents' eyes, Ethan was the radiant son of our family, a mathematical genius who could solve complex problems as if with a mere blink. And me, I was just the quiet younger sister, struggling through every page of my textbook, spending hours to achieve merely average grades, while Ethan effortlessly won gold medals at math Olympiads without breaking a sweat. Our home, a typical red brick American house in the suburbs, with a neatly trimmed lawn and an American flag fluttering on the porch, appeared to be the perfect picture of the American dream. But inside it was an arena of injustice, where I was always the loser. My parents, James and Susan, never hid their favoritism. When Ethan turned 16, they threw a grand party, handing him the keys to a brand new gleaming Ford Mustang that sparkled under the summer sun. The applause, laughter, and their proud gazes fixed on Ethan were etched into my memory. 2 years later, when my own 16th birthday arrived, I stood in the front yard holding my breath, hoping for something similar. But instead of a car, my mother handed me an old faded green bicycle, bought at a local store's end-of-season sale. "It's very practical, Emma," she said with an awkward smile. I forced a smile in return, thanking them while my heart shattered. That creaky, peeling bike became a symbol of my place in the family, always second best, always overlooked. But there was one person who truly saw me, my grandmother. She was a lighthouse in the storm of my family, with her snow-white hair and a smile as warm as winter sunlight. Every birthday, she sent me a handwritten card with a little cash tucked inside for ice cream or books. She would sit with me on the old couch in the living room, listening as I shared my dreams of becoming a psychologist, helping others who were struggling with themselves. "You'll do it, Emma," she said, her eyes shining with belief. "I'll help you when you get to college. That's a promise." Her promise was a lifeline keeping me afloat through my high school years, when I felt like a ghost in my own home. From the outside, our family might have looked like a quintessential American one. Dad an engineer, mom an elementary school teacher, 2 kids growing up with big dreams. But the favoritism in my family wasn't just a personal issue. It reflected a larger truth about society. In America, we often celebrate those who shine, the geniuses, the stars. But what happens to those who don't fit that mold? Those who struggle, who fight every day to prove their worth. I learned early on that justice doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes it must be fought for, especially when those in power, like my parents, use their authority to crush one child while cherishing another. But in my heart, my grandmother's promise was a spark of hope, reminding me that I deserve to be seen, to be loved, and to be given a chance to shine. My grandmother's promise burned like a small flame in my heart, flaring brighter as I left that suburban house full of injustice to begin my college journey. I was accepted into a university in a different city, hundreds of miles from home, with a partial scholarship, the result of long nights hunched over my desk, trying to prove I was worth something no less than Ethan. I imagined stepping into a new world where I could define myself free from my brother's shadow. But reality quickly crushed that dream. When I moved into my dorm, a small room with gray concrete walls and a creaky bunk bed, I waited for the money my grandmother had promised. But month after month, my bank account remained nearly empty, holding only a few dollars from my part-time jobs back home. I called my mother, my voice trembling as I asked about Grandma's money. "I need it for books, Mom." She said she'd send it. Her sigh over the phone felt like a knife. "Emma, how selfish can you be?" She snapped, her tone sharp as a blade. "Your grandmother is having financial troubles. You should be ashamed for asking. Get a job, don't mooch." I stood frozen in the corner of my dorm, the phone burning in my hand. Her words didn't just hurt. They planted a seed of guilt, as if I was wrong for asking about what I'd been promised. But I didn't have time to dwell in pain. College life didn't wait for anyone, and the bills kept piling up. I found a job at a small coffee shop near campus, where the smell of roasted coffee mingled with soft jazz music. The job saved me from days of gnawing hunger, as I could sometimes take home leftover sandwiches or pastries at a discount. But it wasn't enough. Tuition, textbooks, dorm, rent, it all loomed like waves threatening to drown me. So I took on a second job writing content for websites, spending hours under the blue glow of my ancient laptop, churning out ads for products I could never afford. Between 2 jobs and a packed class schedule, I became a shadow, dragging myself from lectures to the coffee shop to my dorm desk. Sleep became a luxury, only coming in moments when I collapsed from exhaustion. Some days, the coffee shop closed for holidays or repairs, and I faced hunger. One week, when it shut down for a health inspection, I was left with a few packs of instant noodles and a nearly empty jar of peanut butter. My mind spun, my body so weak, I nearly fainted in class. Thankfully, my roommate Lily saw the desperation in my eyes. Without asking, she shared her food, homemade meals, bags of chips, and sometimes slipped a few dollars into my hand for coffee. "We're like sisters, Emma," she said, with a bright smile that made me want to cry. But the breaking point came when my old laptop, the only thing keeping my work and studies alive, died. The screen went black as if my dreams had gone dark too. I sat on the dorm floor sobbing until Lily knocked, handing me $500 she'd borrowed from her parents. "You'll pay it back later," she said, resting a hand on my shoulder. I recorded every cent in a notebook, vowing to repay her. But deep down, I knew I owed Lily more than just money. These struggles weren't just financial, they were proof of the injustice I'd faced since childhood. While I fought to survive, my parents praised Ethan as if he were the embodiment of the American dream, a brilliant, promising young man, shining in college. But I never got details about his life, only brief, shallow texts, as if Ethan lived in another world. Society often talks about the American dream, that hard work leads to success. But what happens when your own family, the people meant to lift you up, push you down? I learned that injustice doesn't just come from the outside. Sometimes it's rooted in the very home you grew up in. But I didn't give up. My grandmother's promise, though unfulfilled, remained a guiding light, and Lily's kindness reminded me that some people are willing to stand against injustice, no matter how small their actions. I sat on the bus heading back home, my heart a tangle of emotions. The bag on my lap held a small gift for my grandmother, a framed photo of us from my high school graduation. My smile radiant beside her proud gaze. It was all I could afford with the little money left after buying the bus ticket. But I didn't care. Returning to my grandmother's house, the only place I truly felt I belonged, was enough to lighten my heart. I imagined her cozy home filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies and the sound of laughter. But deep down, a vague unease gnawed at me, the family's silence, Ethan's curt texts, and the feeling that something was wrong. When I stepped into my grandmother's house, the birthday party was already in full swing. The dining room table was laden with food, golden fried chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, and glistening powdered sugar donuts. Aunts, uncles, and cousins gathered around their chatter, mixing with soft jazz from Grandma's old speaker. I hugged my mother Susan, a brief embrace, but her eyes avoided mine, as if hiding something. "Where's Ethan?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, he's busy studying for exams," my father James replied quickly, his voice slightly rushed. "He sends his love to Grandma." I nodded, but a strange intuition twisted my stomach. I sat at the table, trying not to show my eagerness, as plates of food were passed around. How long had it been since I'd eaten a proper meal like this? In college, I survived on instant noodles and leftover cafe sandwiches, my stomach growling during lectures. I took a bite of fried chicken, its rich flavor like a gift from heaven. But the moment of peace was shattered. My cousin Mason, sitting across from me, suddenly spoke up, his voice loud enough to silence the room. "God, Emma, you're so skinny. You've lost a ton of weight." Heat rushed to my face, embarrassed by the eyes now fixed on me. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in her tone, light but artificial. "Oh, you know college girls these days. Emma's probably doing that intermittent fasting trend." I opened my mouth to protest, but my grandmother spoke first, her voice sharp as a blade. "Mason's right. Emma, you're too thin." Her eyes narrowed with concern. "Isn't the $1,500 I send you every month enough for food?" Her question exploded like a bomb in the room. The fork in my hand clattered onto the plate. I stared at her, my mind reeling. "What money, Grandma?" I whispered, my voice so faint it was barely audible. I haven't received anything since starting college. The room fell into a deadly silence. Eyes darted between me, my grandmother, and my parents. My heart pounded, threatening to burst from my chest. Grandma turned to my parents, her voice calm but cold as ice. "James, Susan, do you have anything to explain?" My mother trembled, her lips quivering. "Mom, it's complicated. Maybe we shouldn't discuss this in front of everyone." But Grandma cut her off, her voice like a whip. "I have nothing to be ashamed of. Speak, what did you do with Emma's money? If you don't tell the truth now, I'll call the police." My mother burst into tears, her dramatic sobs echoing in the tense room. My father bowed his head, staring at his hands as if they held answers. We used the money for Ethan," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "He got into gambling. It started in high school with bad friends and it got worse. We tried everything, therapists, rehab centers, but he kept relapsing." His words hit me like a hammer. All those years when I was scolded for not being good enough, when I was overlooked because Ethan was shining, it was all a lie. Ethan wasn't the family star. He was an addict, and my parents had stolen my future to feed his mistakes. I sat there paralyzed as childhood memories flooded back like a tidal wave. The times Ethan was praised for merely existing, the times I was told to be more like Ethan, the days I was so hungry, my stomach ached. My grandmother stood, her face a mask of restrained fury. "Everyone, keep enjoying the party. I need to speak with James and Susan privately." She gestured for my parents to follow, and they quietly walked to her office, their shoulders slumped like scolded children. I remained at the table, my hands trembling, unable to eat another bite. Mason placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You okay?" But I couldn't answer, only shook my head and excused myself, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. This story isn't just about my family's betrayal. It's a reminder of how power, even in the hands of parents, can be abused to cause harm. In America, we talk about justice, about everyone having equal rights. But when the people closest to you, those meant to protect you, turn their backs and steal your opportunities, what do? I learned that truth, however painful, is the first step to reclaiming power. And that moment at my grandmother's birthday party was when I began to see the light at the end of the tunnel, a light ignited by her anger and resolve, and by my own resilience. I sat in my grandmother's dining room, the soft glow of the old chandelier casting light on the shattered pieces of truth that had just come to light. The chatter and laughter of the guests slowly resumed, but it sounded distant, as if from another world. I pushed food around my plate, unable to swallow, my mind reeling with my father's words. "We used the money for Ethan." Each word was a knife cutting into the years I'd struggled, starved, and wondered why I wasn't good enough to be loved. I quietly left the table, my steps light, as if afraid to break something further, and moved to the hallway. The door to my grandmother's office was closed, but I pressed my ear against it, catching fragments of the confrontation. My grandmother's voice, sharp but controlled, came in snippets. 5 years of lies, trying to help him, my father's voice, desperate, responded. We had no other choice. I couldn't listen anymore, my heart constricting. I returned to the table, but the world around me had changed, as if the perfect family portrait of the American dream had been torn apart, revealing the ugly cracks beneath. 30 minutes later, my parents emerged from the office, my mother's eyes red and mascara streaked across her cheeks. They didn't look at anyone, just grabbed their coats and left without a word. 5 minutes later, my grandmother appeared, forcing a smile. "Who wants cake?" she said, her voice trying to sound cheerful, but her eyes were heavy. The party continued in an awkward atmosphere, everyone pretending not to notice the elephant in the room. When the last guest left, my grandmother took my hand, her grip warm but trembling slightly. "Emma, don't go home tonight. Stay with me for a few days." I nodded, relief washing over me. The thought of facing my parents made me feel sick. The next morning, in my grandmother's small kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. She sat across from me, her eyes tired, but her voice firm. "I need to tell you everything your parents said last night." She began, clutching her coffee mug. "I never directly paid for your or Ethan's tuition. I gave the money to your parents because I trusted them. I thought it would be simpler at my age not to deal with bank transfers." She took a sip of coffee, her gaze sharp. Your scholarship covered part of your tuition, only needing $40,000 instead of $100,000 as expected. They kept the remaining $60,000 and used it for Ethan. My blood ran cold. Is there more, Grandma? I asked, my voice choked. She looked me in the eye. Ethan never went to college. After high school, they sent him to Riverdale, thinking a fresh start would keep him away from his gambling friends. But no, he found new friends with the same bad habits. She shook her head. All those times they said he was busy with exams. Lies. I gave $80,000 for his education, plus $1,500 a month for you, for nearly 2 years. They used it all to pay Ethan's gambling debts, send him to rehab, hire therapists. Nothing worked. I gripped my coffee mug, my hands shaking so much I feared I'd spill it. Those years when I ate leftover cafe sandwiches, when I cried over a broken laptop, when I nearly fainted from hunger, could have been avoided. My parents had chosen Ethan not once, but over and over, stealing my future to save his mistakes. I'm sorry, Emma, my grandmother said, taking my hand across the table. I should have checked with you directly. From now on, I'll send $2,000 a month straight to your account. No middleman. Her words were a lifeline, pulling me from the whirlpool of betrayal. I stayed with my grandmother for 3 more days, filled with long conversations about school friends and my dreams. For the first time in years, I felt heard, seen. My parents called a few times, but my grandmother gently declined, saying I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't sure when I would be. As she drove me to the bus station, she slipped an envelope into my hand. Emergency fund, she said, her eyes stern. Don't tell me you won't take it. I smiled, tears falling silently as I hugged her goodbye. Back at college, I was reborn. With $2,000 a month from my grandmother, I quit the content writing job that had drained my soul. I kept working weekends at the coffee shop, not for money, but because I loved the smell of coffee and the brief chats with customers. Her money gave me freedom to buy new textbooks instead of crowding the library, freedom to fill my dorm fridge with real food, freedom to replace clothes worn threadbare after 2 years. I paid Lily back every cent I owed her with a tight hug and thanks that could never be enough. I joined a study group feeling for the first time that I belonged in the academic world where I could shine on my own terms. But the biggest change wasn't just financial. It was the sense of freedom, the realization that I was no longer the overlooked girl in my family. I began to see myself through my grandmother's eyes, a resilient young woman, worthy of love, worthy of living. American society often praises self-reliance, the idea that you can overcome any hardship if you work hard enough. But my story shows a different truth sometimes. Injustice comes from those closest to you, and to overcome it, you need someone who believes in you, like my grandmother did. My parents' betrayal wasn't just a family issue. It was a reminder that power, whether held by parents or anyone else, can be abused to perpetuate inequality. But with my grandmother's support, I was taking back control of my life one step at a time. The early autumn sun streamed through my dorm window, illuminating my desk, where brand new psychology textbooks sat neatly beside a steaming cup of coffee. For the first time since starting college, I felt like I was living, not just surviving. The $2,000 a month from my grandmother changed everything, not just full meals or new shoes that didn't tear, but a sense of freedom, as if I'd broken the chains of years spent being overlooked. I began to dream bigger, thinking about becoming a psychologist, helping others navigate their own darkness as I had. But just when I thought I'd found peace, the past knocked literally. One Saturday afternoon, as I organized notes for a psychology exam, my dorm door swung open without warning. I looked up to see my mother Susan standing there, her eyes puffy with dark circles. My father James stood behind her, his hair grayer than I remembered, his shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. My roommate Lily glanced at them, sensing the tension, mumbled something about a study group, and left, leaving me to face the two people who had once been my world and now were little more than familiar strangers. "We need to talk," my father said. Sitting at my desk, his voice dry. My mother sat on Lily's bed, her hands clasped tightly as if trying to hold herself together. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall, keeping my voice cold. "What do you want?" My mother leaned forward, her eyes pleading. Emma, we need you to talk to Grandma about her will. I almost laughed, not out of amusement, but at their audacity. No apology, no hint of remorse. Just straight to a demand, as if I were still the obedient girl who'd do anything they asked. No, I said, my voice sharp as a knife. Why should I? My father looked at me as if my question was an insult. Because we're your parents, he said, as if family was a key that unlocked every door. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the small room. Family. That didn't mean anything when you stole my money to pour into Ethan. My mother began to cry, tears streaming down her cheeks. But I no longer felt the softness I once had. You don't understand what we've been through with Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. He's addicted to gambling. It's a disease. I looked straight into her eyes, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. And what about me? Do you know how I've been living? I ate leftover sandwiches from customers' plates at the cafe because I was starving. I wore the same 3 outfits for 2 years because I couldn't afford new clothes. I cried all day when my laptop broke because I had no way to work or study. Lily had to borrow $500 from her parents to help me. And you told me to get a job because I was lazy. My mother paled, but quickly regained her composure. You're exaggerating, she said, her voice rising slightly as if to dismiss the truth. Her words lit a fire in me. Exaggerating, I nearly shouted, not caring if the whole hall heard. Do you know what hunger feels like? It's standing in class. My head spinning from lack of food, trying not to collapse. It's begging my roommate for money to survive. I called, I pleaded for help, and you told me to get a job. You chose Ethan over and over and left me to struggle alone. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. My mother bowed her head, unable to deny my words. My father tried a different tack, his voice almost pleading. Emma, just tell Grandma you're fine, that we supported you fully. That's all we need. I stared at him, incredulous. You want me to lie after everything you've done? He sighed as if I were a stubborn child. We're family, Emma. Families help each other. But the word family was now an empty shell, meaningless to me. Families don't do what you did, I said, standing, my body trembling with anger. I lost 20 pounds my first semester because I was starving. There were days I was so dizzy I couldn't focus. You chose Ethan, the car. The praise, all the money and love. Me, I was an afterthought, a shadow no one noticed. My mother whispered, her voice faint. Ethan is our son. I looked straight at her, my voice breaking but resolute. And I'm your daughter, or did you forget that? My mother covered her face, sobbing, while my father awkwardly patted her shoulder. Try to understand, Emma, he said. Ethan's issues are complicated. We're parents, we couldn't abandon him. I took a deep breath, trying to keep myself from crumbling. I understand Ethan needed help, but you chose to help him by hurting me. That was your choice. My mother looked up, mascara streaked across her cheeks. What are we supposed to do now? Ethan's in trouble again. He owes money to dangerous people. We need Grandma's help. I looked at them, the 2 people who had once been my entire world. Now strangers begging me to fix their mistakes. That's not my problem, I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. My mother gasped. How can you be so cold? Ethan's your brother. I opened the dorm door, gripping the frame. A brother I don't even know anymore. A brother you always put above me. I'm done. You chose your favorite. Now live with the consequences. I pointed to the door. Go, I don't want to see you anymore. My mother cried harder, stumbling out with dramatic sobs, while my father followed silently, his posture defeated. As the door closed, I slid to the floor, trembling. But in that trembling, I felt a new strength. The strength of standing up to those who had abused their family power to crush me. This wasn't just about me and my parents. It was about standing up for justice, even when it meant confronting the people you love most. In America, we're taught that family is everything, but what happens when family becomes a battlefield? I learned that sometimes you have to draw a line, not to destroy, but to protect yourself. And as I sat in that small dorm room, I knew I'd crossed a threshold to freedom, though the cost was pain. The dorm door closed behind my parents, locking away my mother's cries and my father's defeated posture. I sat on the floor back against the bed, my breathing still shaky, but within me a new flame burned not of anger, but of liberation. For the first time, I felt unburdened by my family's expectations or favoritism. I had stood up, drawn a line, and though my heart ached, I knew I'd done the right thing. Lily returned an hour later, looked at my face, and simply said, "That bad, huh?" I told her everything and she shook her head, squeezing my hand. "You're stronger than I thought, Emma. They don't deserve you." Her words were like an invisible hug, reinforcing my resolve to move forward. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my studies like a warrior reclaiming her battlefield. With my grandmother's $2,000 a month, my life was infused with oxygen. I no longer had to count every penny for food or worry about shoes tearing in the winter. My dorm fridge was now stocked with fresh fruit milk and real meals I'd only dreamed of. I bought new textbooks, no longer crowding the library for old copies. I replaced threadbare clothes with soft sweaters and new boots, feeling like I was stepping into a new version of myself. An Emma not defined by scarcity. My grade soared from a 3.1 to a 3.8, and for the first time, I felt I belonged in this academic world where my ideas and ambitions were recognized. One afternoon in my psychology class, my professor, Dr. Carter, asked me to stay after. "Your analysis in this essay is truly impressive, Emma," she said, pushing up her glasses, her eyes bright. "Have you considered applying to be a research assistant for the department?" Before, I would have declined immediately, knowing I couldn't spare time from 2 jobs. But now I smiled, my heart racing. "I'd love to try, ma'am. When's the application due?" Those words were a declaration not just of opportunity, but of finally daring to dream big, to believe I was worthy. Life wasn't just about studying. One day, Lily burst into the room waving a colorful flyer. "Spring break in Miami," she squealed, her eyes sparkling. "The group's planning it. You have to come." My old instincts urged me to say no, the habit of those penny-pinching days, when every expense was a painful calculation. But then I remembered I didn't have to live like that anymore. "You know what," I said, grinning. "I'm in." Lily's jaw dropped and she threw a pillow at me. "Who are you and what have you done with my Emma?" Spring break in Miami was something I'd never dared dream of. Bright sunshine, waves crashing on the shore, and friends' laughter. I bought a new swimsuit without checking the price, ordered my favorite dish at a restaurant without worry, and even splurged on a jet ski ride. For the first time, I felt the freedom of youth, something I should have had all along. But even as I built my new life, the shadow of the past lingered. One evening, as I prepared my research assistant application, my phone buzzed. It was my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. "Emma," her voice serious. "I thought you should know. Your parents sold the house. They're renting a small apartment now. They're struggling, Emma. The house money only just covered Ethan's gambling debts." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it away. "That was their choice, Aunt Linda," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. She sighed. "I'm not saying you have to help. Just thought you should know. Ethan's in rehab, a strict inpatient program. Maybe this time it'll work." I called my grandmother that night, recounting the conversation with Aunt Linda. "Do you want me to help them?" she asked, her voice steady. I sat on my bed looking out the dorm window at the twinkling city lights. "No," I said, after a moment's thought. "They chose that path." My grandmother didn't push, only said, "Good. You're not responsible for their choices. Focus on building your life." And that's exactly what I did. I kept my weekend cafe job, not for money, but because I loved the moments behind the counter, chatting with customers, and smelling roasted coffee. I joined study groups, applied for the research assistant position, and for the first time, I felt I was living up to my potential. My story isn't just about overcoming hardship. It's about reclaiming power from those who abused it. In America, we often praise self-reliance, but my journey shows that sometimes you need someone who believes in you, like my grandmother, to rise after being betrayed by family. The injustice I faced wasn't just personal. It reflects a broader reality. Power, whether in a family or society, can be abused to perpetuate inequality. But with the right support and resilience, I'm rewriting my story one page at a time, and this time I hold the pen. The late spring sunlight filtered softly through the trees outside the university library, where I sat with a stack of psychology books, notes sprawling across pages. My life had found a new rhythm mornings. Of focused study afternoons at the cafe, chatting with customers, and dreams of a future no longer clouded by the past. I was no longer the starving girl, juggling 2 jobs and my family's indifference. Thanks to my grandmother, I had room to breathe, to dream, to become the Emma I'd always wanted to be, a strong, independent woman full of hope. But just when I thought I'd left the past behind, it found a way to creep back like a cold wind through a door I thought I'd locked. One evening, as I walked from the library to my dorm, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Emma, it's me, Ethan." The voice on the other end was weak but familiar, an echo from childhood, when we were allies before gambling and favoritism tore us apart. "I'm calling from rehab. Part of recovery is apologizing to those I've hurt." I stopped sitting on a bench by the path, the streetlights casting shadows on my face. Other students passed by laughing and talking, but I felt pulled into a silent void. "I know what Mom and Dad did." Ethan continued, his voice steady, unflinching. "They used your money to pay my gambling debts. I didn't know at the time, but that doesn't make it less wrong. I'm sorry, Emma, for my part in this." I gripped the phone, unsure how to respond. Ethan's apology was unexpected, the first time a family member had acknowledged the harm I'd endured. "It doesn't fix things," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "But thanks for saying it." Ethan didn't ask for forgiveness, only said, "I just wanted you to know I understand and I'm trying to change." When I hung up, I sat on that bench for a long time, watching students pass, living the normal college life I was only now experiencing. Ethan's apology didn't erase the days I went hungry or the nights I cried from exhaustion, but it was a small crack in the wall between me and my past. A few days later, a letter arrived at my dorm. My mother's handwriting, Susan, clear on the envelope. I nearly threw it away, but curiosity won. Sitting on my bed, I opened it and read the brief lines. "Emma, we've moved to a small apartment. The address is below if you want to visit. Ethan's in rehab. The doctors say he has a chance if he sticks with it. We've thought a lot. We made mistakes, big ones. We can't change the past, but we want you to know we're proud of you for standing on your own. Love, Mom." No real apology, no specific acknowledgement of what they'd done, just vague words as if they wanted to ease their conscience without facing the truth. I handed the letter to Lily, who read it and shook her head. "That's it." After everything they did, I shrugged, tucking the letter into a drawer. I didn't expect more, and I truly didn't. I didn't reply to the letter, and I had no intention of visiting their new apartment. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine, a path no longer centered on pleasing them or fixing Ethan's mistakes. As spring passed, I immersed myself in my new life. The research assistant job I landed was a turning point, working with Dr. Carter, analyzing human behavior data. I felt closer to my dream of becoming a psychologist. Study group sessions with friends became cherished moments where we debated theories and laughed over small things. My grandmother called every Sunday, and I looked forward to each conversation, hearing her stories of her youth, a girl caught between a beautiful older sister and a prodigy younger brother, yet who found her own way to shine. "You're doing the same, Emma," she said, her voice full of pride. "You're building your own life." One evening, I got a text from a cousin. "Heard about your parents' house." A quick call to my grandmother clarified everything. My parents had sold the house to pay Ethan's gambling debts, but the money wasn't enough. They were living in a small rented apartment, and Ethan was back in rehab. "Do you want me to help them?" my grandmother asked again, as she had before. I thought of them, my father with his graying hair, my mother with her tired eyes, and part of me wanted to feel guilty. But I shook my head, though she couldn't see. "No, Grandma, they chose that path." She didn't argue, only said, "Focus on yourself, Emma. That's what matters most." As the semester ended, I stood in the library, looking out at the sunlit campus. I thought of Ethan, his apology, and my mother's letter. I didn't hate Ethan. He was a victim of addiction and my parents' endless enabling. But I also didn't feel responsible for fixing his life. I had been the forgotten girl, pushed aside for the golden child. But now I was Emma, a college student with high grades, a research assistant, a friend, and a woman writing her own story. My future was no longer defined by my family's choices. It was mine, built from resilience, my grandmother's kindness, and the belief that I deserved a better life. In America, we often talk about the dream of freedom, freedom to be yourself, to overcome adversity. But that freedom doesn't come easily. It requires standing up against injustice, whether from family or society. For me, this journey is proof that even when those closest to you betray you, you can find the strength to shape your own destiny. I stepped out of the library, the sunlight warm on my face, and for the first time, I felt I truly belonged in this world, not as a shadow, but as a flame. My story is a testament to a truth: when power in a family or anywhere is abused to perpetuate injustice, one act of courage can break the cycle. I stood up against my parents' favoritism, reclaimed control of my life, and found freedom in shaping my own future. The lesson for you is this: never let anyone, even family, dim your worth. Fight for yourself, for justice, and for your dreams. That's how we as Americans define an indomitable spirit.